All right, so we'll get started. So this presentation is mainly if you are super early and have a few customers and trying to get more customers, right? As I said, this is more of a theoretical introduction. It will be very short, about 20 minutes, and then Bernard's presentation will be an hour. That's after lunch, so be here on time at 1 o'clock. A lot more tactical, a lot more useful. But this is the theoretical basics, that's important to have. All right, so we're going to talk about, this is just segueing from last presentation. So if you're pre-product market fit, you're working on your product messaging targeting, you're running macro experiments that are non-scalable. Right, so you're iterating on your messaging and language. I put that in the very top because it is important, and you also want to figure out who your target audience is, and then you go build your product. If you had it the other way around, you might want to start thinking about it this way. Even if you have a product that's post-product market fit and you want to add features, you want to add more stuff to your existing product, you still want to do it this way. So you still want to get your problem solution right. You want to figure out who among your existing customers will buy the upsell, email them, ask them, get them to pay for it, and then go build the feature. Okay, so that's the general concept of it. Even if you have existing customers that you're trying to upsell something to, or if you have no customers and you're trying to get new customers, you want to get the language right, you want to get the target audience right, sell it to them, and then go build the minimum core features that are required for you to have them start using it. All of this is non-scalable stuff, which is what you need. There's nothing scalable you can do here except for how you use your own time and your own energy, that you're the only thing that you can make scalable and improve week over week. Everything else that you do, basically you work on your self-awareness. All right, so the first step you do here if you're pre-product market fit is you need to validate or invalidate your hypotheses on who your customer is, the problem, and the solution. So you have an idea, you have an assumption of what problem you're solving and how to solve it. There are multiple solutions for the same problem, and you have an assumption about who's going to start using it, especially if you're an engineer who's built a solution that's looking for a target customer. I really hope you're not, but if you are, definitely validate before you go acquire a bunch of customers. And the second thing you need to do is learn their language. The words that you use, super, super, super important, especially in relation to what's been happening the last couple of days. A whole bunch of articles from Scott Adams and everywhere else about how psychology and language is being used to influence people in the political scenario the last few days. So language, super important. That doesn't mean English, French. It's just the words that you use. Okay, and then that's obviously how do you go get your customers, understand where they hang out, so you can go target them there when you want to scale. So how do you do all of this? That's what's called customer development, basically. So where do your potential customers hang out? Go talk to them. These are some random examples I put together. So my startup was a parenting startup. So I was always the creepy person outside schools, just literally ambushing innocent parents walking by and asking them hey, how do you do this today? And how would you do that later? I find one-on-one conversations super, it's not scalable at all, but I get the emotions and I get how big of a problem something is with in-person. So I personally go for in-person conversations, especially if you're an engineer and you hate talking to people, you should go to have in-person conversations. You must make those calls. You must talk to people one-on-one. But if you know your customer already, then if you know something about them, and especially if you want to scale, you want to figure out where they hang out as a group online so you can target them at scale. So friends of mine who are parents, I also hung outside prenatal yoga classes and so on. And then once I started to scale my startup, I never spent any money. We never had any money. I was one of those poor startups sleeping on friends' couches. So I would go to school mailing lists. I would ask my friends to post in their school mailing lists. In their office have parental mailing lists. So you need to figure out what are the places where people would do things for you. Basically, you beg, borrow, steal, right? You beg people that you know. If you're like Airbnb, they, I guess, borrowed or stole the Craigslist customers. You all know that hack. So you need to figure out where your potential customers hang out and go get them from there. If you're targeting developers, developers meet in person in industry events. I don't know why I put industry events, but yeah, if, let's say Twilio is hosting something, a hackathon or like a startup weekend or something like that. You can go meet people there. Or online, Reddit, Hacker News, Stack Overflow. I just added wine aficionados. I have no clue why, even though I know nothing about wine, but I'm assuming there are wine tasting events. And then if I was going to do anything with wine, I would just probably just drive to Napa and stand in the parking lot of like a couple of those, wine places. Because again, I know nothing about it, and that's where I think most of the people hang out, right? Most of these problems would be solved if you were an authentic founder. If you know the industry you're going to work in, you wouldn't have any of these problems. Again, if you're an engineer with a solution looking for a customer and a problem, this is important. But hopefully you are the other way around. You know your customer and you're passionate about solving a problem for them, and you also know what the problem is, in which case you already know most of these things. You know who they are, you know what problems they have, you know where they're hanging out. But even if they do, so let's say you're selling to an SMB, a coffee shop owner, it's not just, do I talk about where? But I'll tell you the context as well, right? Like, you never talk to people when they're busy, right? You need to know the context. Every time I stood outside restaurants, you never catch somebody who's going into a restaurant. They're hungry. They're the last people who respond to your questions. Similarly, if you're waiting, if you're ambushing people at a train station, ambush them when they're waiting for the train, not when they're getting off the train and walking towards the destination, right? So context is super important. So if you're approaching a coffee shop owner, do it at the time when the coffee shops are not busy. For many of the B2B people, if you want to reach one of the hacks, if you want to reach the CXO, I think usually if you call between 7 a.m. and 9 a.m., the gatekeeper is not usually in the office, but if the CXO is there, they might just directly pick up the phone. So things like that. Just know the context of where this target customer is and what is the right time to approach them. So once you do, what you want to ask is lots of open-ended questions about the problem and potential solution, right? Like many of the why and how questions. So you want to validate your hypothesis on the problem and the solution. Why do you want to do this? And how do you do this today? What frustrates you the most about it? Basically, let them bitch, crib, and complain, right? Like if somebody is bitching, cribbing, and complaining, it means they have a problem. Now you need to figure out like what kind of a problem it is, and don't start talking about your solution yet, but potentially what is the right ways for them to solve it. Again, never talk about, hey, here's what I built, would you buy this? That's not a customer development conversation you have. You want to know the most about their problems and what they perceive as a solution, and the language they use. So all of these, when they talk about stuff, they're going to talk a lot about their fears and aspirations and motivations, goals and frustrations. These are important because when you phrase something in a landing page or in an email or even in a cold call, you want to talk in a language they understand. It's their language, not your language, right? So you as a business person, you tend to usually distill problems into some abstract words. Please, for sake of sanity, do not use any of the corporate words, right? Use very specific applications and scenarios that they would understand. And then when you talk about the problem or the solution, use their words. In fact, if you're running a UX test on like the tagline or something like that, the first thing I would do is like ask a few of my customers how they would define my product, copy, paste what they say right into my tagline. It usually works way better than whatever you come up with, right? Because what people relate to is super important. Heathen will talk a lot more about this afternoon, before Nemo's talk, specifically about language. Okay, so it's not about you, it's always about them. Just remember that. So now you have a language, you can either now, the easiest thing these days is to put together like a landing page, right? Use Unbounce, put together a landing page, define what the change in status is. So like, hey, this is what your life is like right now, this is what your life's going to change to if you start using this. Because you want them to look at something and go, yes, that's me, yes, that's me, yes, that's me, right? Identify themselves, like see themselves in all those scenarios, then they're likely to say yes to the few more things you ask. So then the next few asks will be like, hey, do you want to sign up? Hey, do you want to pay for this? So if they say yes to the first 3 or 4 questions, they're very likely to say yes to the next few. Actually, one of the interesting books to read is Robert Cialdini's Psychology of influence something of psychology. I'll find the book link and send it to you. It's one of those like classic books that's been around for like 20, 30 years, and it's still the best book on like marketing psychology. So the whole yes thing comes from there. So the step 2 is like get them to pay. Customers pay, users don't. So if you have a bunch of people who are using your product but are not paying, they're not your customers, they're your users. Only if they give them your money, they have the real problem, and they really trust that you have the solution. So even if they have the problem and they're not giving you money, they don't trust you. They don't think you have the solution. They're not convinced by the promises you're making. You don't have, you have to figure out why. Why is it that they're not willing to pay you? So get them to pay you first. As I said, you can be doing a whole bunch of things. Go back to the people you did customer development with and ask them if they would buy the product. Hey, I understand, like I spoke to you, you said you had X problem, or like I spoke to others like you, looks like somebody else in your position, other people in your position have similar problems. Is that true? Do you also have this problem? Would you like to try this product out, right? Like go back to your all the people that you met in the customer development phase and get them to be your beta customers, which is still paid customers, or put up landing pages and drive traffic. Just quickly, in terms of driving traffic, think a little bit about what are the right channels for your business. Again, if it's something that people are searching for, then you would do AdWords. If it's something very visual, especially if you know exactly what your target market's interests are, then you would use Facebook. Just different types of targeting. So cold emails, who should you be targeting with your cold emails? So what is the right channel that's fit for your business? Like think through it. This also comes back to the first chart we had about where do your customers hang out online. That's where you would go talk about it, basically. And that's from there, drive traffic to your landing page. Build an MVP, very, very basic features that solve the most important problem. Again, don't try to build everything else. Don't try to make fancy stuff. Just the very basic features that solve that one problem really well. Once you do that, especially when you're very low volume, Heathen would talk more about this, but again, you want to figure out whether they would recommend your product to somebody else and why they would recommend. Again, you had a hypothesis when you built your product, and you're trying to validate whether that hypothesis is true, whether they like your product for which specific feature and why. So literally, when somebody signs up or downloads or buys, you can send them an email asking like, hey, no HTML, just a text email saying like, I'm the founder of this thing. I started for these reasons. I'd love to know why you signed up. I respond to every one of your emails. I want to know more about you. Help me understand your problem. I want to solve it. Just very personal email. And you'd be very surprised by the open rates and response rates to many of these very personal emails that are like non-HTML emails. So you can understand a lot more about why they're using your product, why they signed up, so you can figure out if they signed up for the same reason you expected them to sign up. It also happens that sometimes people download and use your product for something totally different from what you intended it to be. You still want to figure out why that is. So all of these questions here, very open-ended, qualitative questions about your product after you have people using your product to determine product market fit, right? And then this gives you this chart. Why is it that they're using? What are they using? What portions are they liking? Are they likely to recommend? And how are they defining your product? That's also another, how would you describe this product to your friend? That's one of the very important questions I usually ask. Again, that helps me understand what they thought you're doing versus what you're actually doing. And you might discover a use case. And also recommendations of other customers, referrals, and so on. Goes back to, again, if you have enough number of users, you can do a cohort analysis and get your retention curve to be flat. And all of this work is non-scalable, uncomfortable, big experiments. If you're a product person, especially, or an engineer, you have to make those phone calls, get the phone slammed on your face. You have to go in front of people, get out of the building, talk to people, be shown the finger, whatever it is. All of that is rite of passage. There is no way for you to get this information very, very in an easy fashion, unless, of course, you're willing to spend money. Even then, you're still one step removed from the actual data. Yeah, big experiments to figure out your major hypotheses. And all of this is non-scalable, uncomfortable. And hustling is basically trying to figure out, what is it that you can do? Because if you do the same thing everybody else is doing, then you just become noise. Your response rate is pretty low. So try to, the more you understand your customers, the more unique ways you can find to go reach them. So this was just super 101 basic stuff. Bernard will do a total 1-hour presentation with like a lot of tactics, and then the two of us can answer all your questions. All right, so the next presentation is at 1 o'clock, a lot more tactical on pre-product market fit, the things that you could be doing. Thanks.